Sony or JBL? Who makes the best cheap wireless headphones?
Goedendag, we are DHRME. Don't highly regard moronic exhortations. Don't do it.
The Sony WH-CH520 and the JBL Tune 720 BT, we'll just call these Sony and JBL in this video, because we're not in the habit of sharing our passwords with strangers on the internet. Now, both of these headphones retail for around 70 bucks, have no noise cancelling and no touch controls. Starting off with the design and build quality.
The Sony and JBL both come in 4 different colors. We have them here in their yin and yang colors. And in terms of materials, both are hard plastic with faux leather on the ear cups and headband. There isn't any sort of creaking on these, but the JBL takes the cake for the sheer reason that they can fold. You typically fold up headphones before putting them in a case, but this is where you see some of the cost-cutting measures. No cases here, guys.
But if wired audio is important to you, then there is a case to be made here. For only the JBL again, you get a headphone jack with a cable included in the box, and you can use the JBL wired even if the battery is dead. Okay, let's talk battery life numbers. Remember, no active noise cancelling here, so you can expect good numbers. Sony advertises 50 hours of playback and JBL a whopping 76 hours. We here at DHRME always need to test those numbers. Now, the issue with testing these headphones for so long is that it takes a long time, and sometimes things act unpredictably. The Sony, for example, went from 100% to 50% in about 23 hours. So that would suggest about 46 hours in total battery life. The JBL went from 100 to 50% in 81 hours, and we were about to extrapolate that, but when we turned it off and on again, the battery showed 20%. Long story short, that's a lot of battery life and this was a lot of work. Give this video a like if you like it this long. And just for good measure, both these headphones are charged by USB Type-C with quick charging getting you around 1.5 hours of playback after 3 minutes of charge. You can easily throw these headphones into your bag for a vacation and not have to worry about battery life for a while. Just make sure to pause your music before you take these headphones off. Neither of these cans have a wear sensor, so they can't automatically play or pause the audio depending on whether you're wearing them or not.
Instead of touch controls, you get nice, clicky, reliable buttons. The JBL has chunkier buttons, and because of the dimple on the play-pause button, it's easier to know which button you're pressing.
While the tactile feedback on the buttons is always comforting, we did prefer the ones on the Sony to the JBL. The JBL's buttons felt a bit cheap because you can hear the little spring clickety through the headphones. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but something we noticed. The actual functionality of those buttons are the same. You get your play, pause, volume, track controls, and the ability to pull up your voice assistant. The biggest difference is that the Sony works with 3 buttons to do all of those controls, whereas JBL has 4 buttons. JBL's 4th button is for power on and off, but double clicking it will put the device into pairing mode. Pretty handy actually if you switch devices a lot. The only way to do that on the Sony is to keep the power button held in when powering it on.
On the topic of pairing, they both support multi-point. To be honest, we did not expect this at this price point. Oh, and multi sounds like a lot, but this is actually dual point since they can stay connected to 2 devices at the same time.
Despite that pairing button gesture on the JBL, the Sony one-ups the JBL in the multi-point department. On the Sony, you can pull the connection from a previously paired device by just selecting it from the Bluetooth list. And in the Sony app, you can see a device list and connect or disconnect to devices from there if you like. Oh yes, you get companion apps on both of these bad boys. Again, not bad for this price segment. The Sony Headphones app is very familiar and brings you a lot of those features you get on higher end devices. Features like upscaling lower quality audio using DSEE, as well as 360 reality audio. But most importantly, you get a custom EQ and presets. More on audio in a bit. Then you've got the JBL Headphones app, which also has EQ presets and supports custom EQ. Besides that, you get a few other features than the Sony. There's a low latency mode for you gamers out there, and you can change what JBL calls voice aware, which is how much of your own voice you would like to hear when on a phone call.
So how do these perform for phone calls? Let's take a look at the popsicles, the icicles, and the testy.
Pop popsicle, ice icicle, testing, 1 2 3.
In noisy conditions, both headphones cut out background noise quite well, but there's only one clear winner, the Sony CH520. Throughout the test, you could comfortably hear the voice without any weird processing or it cutting out. The JBL 720 BT, although it cut out the car noise better, when it comes to the voice, it was a whole different story. Even in parts where there were no cars, the voice had a lot of reverb and the overall volume was lower, and sometimes not even audible. In the slightly windy situation, we would give the slight edge to the JBL. Not by a whole lot, but you could hear the voice relatively consistently throughout the sample. On the Sony, you could tell that the voice cut out when speaking softly. From a fuckmon perspective, we're happy to see that the volume controls work on calls. The JBL is more fucky though. You can mute the mic by holding down the play pause button when on a call. Whether you're listening to music or taking long phone calls, comfort will be kinda important. What's good to realize is that the Sony is worn on ear, whereas the JBL is a bit curious. It feels like it's neither on ear nor over ear, but somewhere in between. The padding on the headband on both are not extremely plush, but in our testing, we didn't feel any pressure on the crown with the Sony. On the JBL, we did feel it press against our crown after a little while. The ear pads are definitely different in the plushiness department because the JBL has way more cushioning. That's not to say that the Sony is uncomfortable. In our opinion, it was actually more comfortable despite having less cushioning. Compared to the JBL, it even had less clamp and heat generation. Overall, for comfort, the win goes to the Sony. Now, none of these hold a candle against comfort of over-ear headphones, but these headphones are targeted to a different type of customer. Are you the customer looking purely for sound? Then listen up.
Now you're getting reasonable codec selection here, AAC and SBC, and by reasonable we mean super basic, but what about the sound itself? The Sony sounds fine, like there is bass, there is sub bass, but the sub bass is a bit, present and not very controlled. But overall, the Sony sounds like a set of cans that knows its limitations and sticks to them. The famous 5-band EQ in the Headphones Connect app, along with the clear bass slider, does let you tweak the sound to quite a good extent. But software ain't gonna fix mediocre hardware.
The mids sound fine, not great, but there's reasonable timbre to be had. Where it really lacks is the treble, a place where you often see price play a role. It's not very audible, and when you do hear it, it ain't exactly airy. The JBL takes an opposite approach. The V-shape is strong with this one. The sound out of the box is way more open than the Sony. The bass hits harder and is a bit more present. Overall, there is way better instrument separation and space on the JBL, and it turns up the spice on the treble too. But yeah, spicy food can cause indigestion, and we'll stop with the metaphors for now. In quite a few recordings, this comes across sounding artificial and not clean. Timbre is also out of whack, but it's certainly a more fun presentation than Sony.
And even though I don't actually like the stock tuning, that amazing JBL Connect app along with the 10-point EQ and bunch of EQ presets really puts the JBL over the top for us. Starting with the studio preset makes the sound more bearable.
The JBL also has an additional advantage, a 2.5mm to 3.5mm headphone jack that gives you the ability to listen to these passively, even if you're out of battery. But guys, let's be clear, you're not buying any of these even for semi-serious listening. They're okay for this price segment, and if you want a reasonable amount of bass, you'll be fine. And if you want to buy these brands, then just don't expect too much and you'll be okay. And yes, we see you getting your keyboards ready. You can get way better sounding, cheaper headphones. Be that as it may, these are two very popular brands offering similar specs on paper. Multiple color options, buttons with many controls, multi-point support, companion app, and killer battery life. Yes, you sacrifice on the overall comfort and sound quality, but at the price of $70, you're still getting a decent feature set for the money, if you want to own these brands. If not, why not check out this video of a pair of over-ear headphones by Edifier for under $100.
Speaking of money, we do not accept any kind of monetary compensation from companies whose products we review. And the reason we can is because of you guys, our patrons and our YouTube members.
Keep supporting us and the content we create. We love speaking to you guys in the comments, on our Discord server, and on Twitter, X. You've been paying lower and lasting longer.
And we've been DHRME.
Namaste.